All right. Benji, my clock just came up and said it's 11 o'clock. So we'll have
Sounds
people starting to come in, I know, for the next minute or two. So I will just admit while y'all, if y'all want to go ahead and get started.
sure. So Karen, thanks for hosting this. This is good. So a couple of things for those of you who don't know me. I speak really fast, and so the more excited I get about something, the faster I tend to speak. I'm going to consciously try and speak slowly. That it may sound like a bit of a monotone or I'm not excited. I am. I'm just trying to make it, available so you can actually understand what I'm saying during this presentation. This is, and I'm getting up and walking around, which is why you don't see me on my video, because I like to pace while I talk, and I use, as I mentioned earlier, I use my hands a lot. So you can imagine me. I've got my picture up there, just throwing hands wildly in the air and pacing back and forth, and that's what I'm doing. So, and I know a lot of you on the call, but some of you I don't. So let me introduce myself. I'm Benji Sawyer. We're Sawyer Solutions. We're a IT company. We're located in Pelham, and we specialize in security and compliance. We spend our time helping small to medium-sized businesses succeed through technology. This often includes getting them set up to work remotely, even when there's not a pandemic. We deal with a variety of issues on a daily basis, but common phone calls for us are things like, my computer is slow, or why is our printer not working? Or should I click on this link? Or my personal favorite, I clicked on the link, now what should I do? We work with solo operators, and we work with businesses that have hundreds of computers. So we also offer free consultations where we look at how you're set up and we can make some recommendations. So let's start. Maybe start. Click the wrong thing. All right. Many companies and industries have been transitioning to a remote workforce for many years. As you might expect, technology companies are some of the early adopters in this field. We set up Sawyer Solutions from the get-go to allow remote work. And Ken Sawyer, who's my father and one of our founders, first started working remotely in 1985. So we've been doing it for a while. The tools to work remotely have improved quite a bit since 1985, but it's still not a painless process. With the outbreak of coronavirus, many businesses are now faced with the dilemma of either getting their workforce to set up to work remotely or shutting down operations. And I'm assuming that at least some of you on the call are facing that particular dilemma. The tools do not always come properly configured straight out of the box. As a matter of fact, a number of them will leave you quite exposed if you don't turn on or off certain features. Other tools or access methods are completely incapable of being secure and should be avoided at all costs. You also need to make sure your workforce can work effectively using these tools in a way that makes sense for them and the kind of work they are doing. It's no good having a secure workforce if they cannot actually do any work. But it's vital you understand that not taking proper security precautions can be very expensive. We are familiar with a company that has around 10 employees, and they had a data breach. The investigation of that breach alone was well north of $100,000. We have some people in the waiting room.
Yeah, I just saw them.
There are many ways to approach working remotely. There's an overwhelming selection of tools that promise to let you work remotely as if you're in the office. But how are you supposed to figure out what works best for you? It's kind of like someone who's never had salad dressing before, taken to the grocery store and set in the salad dressing aisle and told to choose the dressing that they would like best. You would not expect them to be able to make a good decision without more information. I know I personally want my employees to be as productive as possible, regardless of if they're in the office or not. And I assume you are the same. So just like the hypothetical person in my salad dressing example, you're in need of some guidance on how to make that happen. That's why I'm here today. I'm here to help equip you with some knowledge so you at least know what the most common options look like and some things to think about when making your decisions. We recognize that you likely do not have time to perform a detailed examination of every option and make the perfect choice. So we're going to cover a lot of ground very quickly at a very high level. What we're really shooting for here is that you'll be able to make a good enough choice for now, one that will allow you to avoid the biggest and most common pitfalls. we're going to cover the 3 critical pieces of the puzzle from the technology side: security, remote access tools, and collaboration tools. As I mentioned, this is a lot of ground to cover. As a matter of fact, on the security side, we have multiple 1-hour presentations that go in depth on the topics we're going to cover. Now, we will have time for questions and answers at the end, where I'll be happy to go more in depth on anything that you may want covered here. We will discuss some products you can find commercially available that will help you on this journey, and we will name them by name. We will not, however, go into an in-depth look at the pros and cons of each. The things we're going to go over today are really just the basics. Not every company is the same, and you may have differing or more complex needs and requirements. If you're a solopreneur, then you might not need all of these tools, but you'll still find most useful, and the security stuff is still 100% applicable. Remember that the government still expects you to protect sensitive information even though you have a remote workforce. With the implementation of data breach reporting laws in all 50 states, this means that everyone needs to take proper security precautions, not just people like doctors. You also need to know that the bad guys are trying extra hard right now. They know exactly what is happening, and they understand it is likely easier to penetrate companies as they move to a remote work scenario. This is a big business. These organizations are run just like a normal company. People go to work in an office building. They have managers. There's a CEO. Bonuses are given for performance. This isn't some random hoodie-wearing kid in a basement. Now, the first choice most people make in a remote workforce scenario is, do I supply my computers to my employees, or do I allow them to use their home computers? Now, we've written a blog post you can check out on our website if you want to, that talks about it in depth, but the short answer is, it's better to provide them computers if you can and make it clear they're for work only. If you're not going to provide your workforce computers, you need to consider requiring them, allowing you or your IT vendor to secure and control the relevant home computer. A very distant third place is allowing them to use whatever device they want without any kind of oversight. Now let's talk about what you need to do to secure these computers. Step 1 is making sure that every computer, including Macs, have good paid antivirus running on them. Contrary to popular belief, Macs do get viruses. In fact, the current estimate is between 10 and 30% of Macs are infected. You need to use a paid AV because the free ones don't work well. As a matter of fact, the Avast and AVG, which are 2 of the top free ones, sell your information to whomever wants it. We primarily use SentinelOne for our clients. This is an AV product that uses artificial intelligence to monitor your computer. This is one of a handful of AI-based products on the market today, and it can do some pretty amazing things. As far as I'm aware, all these AI-based AV products have to be bought through companies like us. They do not sell directly to the consumer. Before SentinelOne came out, we used Bitdefender as our primary AV platform and still have a large number of clients that are on it. It's considered one of the top, if not the top, traditional antivirus. You can buy this directly from the manufacturer or through companies like us, and it will run on Macs. Now, we had one client that did not believe in paid antivirus and insisted on using Avast on his computers. They had about 10 computers, and he got ransomware 4 times in a 6-month period. After allowing us to install Bitdefender, they didn't have that problem again. And it wasn't because his employees changed their habits. We would still catch stuff, Bitdefender would still catch stuff on a regular basis that they were trying to do that was inappropriate. But it's just a difference in the product. We spend a lot of times talking about passwords. They are super, super important. You need to have a unique and complex password on all websites you use. You need to have a password management tool such as LastPass to help you with this. I've personally used LastPass since it hit the market over 10 years ago. 1Password is a newcomer, which I've heard good things about. I've never personally used it, but it is a reputable tool. For those people that save their passwords into their browser, you need to be aware this is not secure. Your passwords are easily recovered by malware. 2-factor authentication, also called multi-factor authentication, is also critical in this day and age. 2-factor is commonly set up to text your cell phone a code when you try to access a website from a computer you haven't done it on before. The system isn't perfect or unhackable, but it does pose a significant barrier to the bad guys gaining access. You especially need unique and complex passwords and two-factor on your email system. Email compromise is very common and can lead to significant data breaches, or they can just steal money from you. We often get asked how the bad guys get your passwords. One way is through a direct phishing attempt. But commonly what happens is some website gets breached, and they either get your passwords in plain text, or they can attempt to recover them by encrypting every word in the dictionary plus other common passwords. Once they have your password from this breached website, they will then attempt to use it on other sites like banks, and email, and social media. And this is the reason you need strong, unique passwords and two-factor. Next, make sure your computers are running operating systems and programs that are supported by the manufacturers and kept up to date or patched. This means when operating systems like Windows 7 reach the end of their support, you need to replace them because security issues for it are no longer going to be addressed. If you're still using Windows 7 or Server 2008, you need to be aware that Microsoft already ended support for those on January 14th of this year. If you're still using Windows XP or Server 2003 or some earlier version of operating system, then you are really at risk and need to mitigate your exposures immediately. XP went out of support over 6 years ago, but we still run into people that use it. Now, it isn't uncommon for viruses to be stopped simply because you have up-to-date programs. So that's why it's important. Now, we often see really old computers in the manufacturing space. There will be a piece of really expensive equipment that's hooked up to a really old computer that drives it. And the company that made the equipment may be out of business or wants some exorbitant amount of money to upgrade the computer, if they even can do it. This situation is less than ideal, but it's quite common, and there are steps you can take to mitigate the risk from the old systems, but it does require a good bit of know-how. Just for reference, the current oldest computer operating system we deal with is Windows 98, and it is running an expensive piece of equipment at a manufacturing environment. With your computers spread all over, it is more likely that one will be lost or stolen, so you need to make sure you encrypt them. Most modern business class computers, PCs, come with BitLocker and can be easily and quickly encrypted. The Mac version is FileVault, and you can find that on every Mac in your system preferences. Encrypting computers combined with a good password means that if you lose a computer, you can reasonably assume your data is safe, which can save you quite a bit of time, money, and reputation. Another reason to encrypt those computers is locking out employees that you need to fire while they are remote. A couple of weeks ago, we had a client let us know she was going to fire an employee and wanted us to wipe the computer remotely. We told her that since the computer was encrypted, we could actually just remotely change the user's passwords and completely lock them out of the system. Once the owner had the physical possession of the computer again, she could get back into it. This saved her hours of labor having to rebuild the computer and made sure her former employee didn't do anything they shouldn't have, even though they had it in their possession for a week after being fired. While not a security precaution, backup is absolutely critical to your business. You need to make sure that you are backing up your data and it's being backed up off-site with a reputable cloud vendor. For people going at it alone, we generally recommend CrashPlan or Backblaze. We actually use a CrashPlan variant internally. It's important to understand, however, that these backup solutions are not always the right choice. Backing things up correctly can be kind of complicated and may require professional IT help. And we have tons of story about backup, and we restore data from backup on a weekly basis because someone deleted a file they shouldn't have. However, one of our favorite stories about how important backup is involves a prospect we were talking to some years ago. One of the questions we ask when discussing things with prospects is, what are they doing for backup? They told us that they were backing up to a hard drive, and we had them show it to us. Turns out the hard drive hadn't been plugged in for 9 months because the cable was damaged. Luckily, we had a spare cable on hand, and we plugged it in and got them going. 3 days later, they called us because they had gotten ransomware. Luckily, it was on a single computer, and while it did get server data, it didn't encrypt the backup we had plugged in. We were able to get them back up and running with almost no data loss, and they were extremely grateful they called us. Unfortunately, we often get calls about getting back data from ransomware after it's happened, and there is no backup. In that case, you can either pay the ransom, recreate the data, or just do without. Backup needs to happen before you get hit. Once you have things like antivirus and updates working, you need to make sure your workforce is trained. You should be training them on the basic security ideas, such as unique and strong passwords, as well as training them on how to spot phishing attempts. Most employees don't want to mess up their computers, but no one has ever told them, for example, that those coupon printers they want to use to get that really great deal are always malware. Training is not a once and done thing. It needs to happen frequently, not just for repetition, but because the state of the art changes how the bad guys attack. Now, we mentioned coupon printers because we actually had a client where their employees really love to get great deals. While we expected the occasional issue, they were getting viruses way more than normal. When we asked them what they were doing right before everything went wrong, they said they were just downloading a coupon printer to get some coupons. Once we explained that those were not good things to download, the problem stopped happening. No one had ever taken the time to just talk to them and explain. Unfortunately, you need to plan on when you have a data breach, not if. To that end, if you do not have a cyber liability policy, you need one. A good policy will help offset some of the costs associated with the data breach. Generally, they cover things like the forensics investigation to determine what happened. Sometimes they'll also cover the cost of notification and even pay for business interruption. All these policies are not created equally, so you really need to make sure you get one that covers your exposures. If you think IT companies are expensive, then you will be very unhappy with how much a forensics investigation will cost you. Just like every other type of insurance, this is something you hope you never have to use, but if you do have to use it, it can save your business. Now, we understand that you may not have a choice because of time and budget and whether or not you have your employees use their home computers initially. But in order to reduce your business liability, we strongly recommend that you treat personal computers as office computers and take the necessary steps to secure them. We also recommend, as time and budget allow, to start issuing computers if you plan on allowing remote work long term. So once again, although we recommend using a company-owned computer, you can use employee-owned computers, and we have clients that do that. We're happy to work with you to make them as secure as possible. So we've briefly covered the security basics. Now we will talk about how you can get to your systems and data remotely. Once again, this is not a comprehensive list of ways to accomplish this. These are just the most common ones we find and ones we find that are useful for small to medium-sized businesses. It's important to remember that the reliability and the usability of the remote access tools will affect employee morale and productivity. If things are difficult to use or just broken all the time, your employees will just naturally be less motivated to perform their job functions. Traditionally, virtual private networking, or VPN, is the way a remote worker would connect to the primary office. This technology puts you on the network so you can have access to everything as if you were physically in the office. This would let you connect to your servers to access your files or print to any printers you had in the office. It is important for you to understand that letting a computer connect via VPN puts it on your network, and you are exposing your network to any issues or malware that remote computer has. Now, it is also common to use Windows desktop, remote desktop, to connect a computer in the office, so you wouldn't use as much bandwidth. This would allow you to use certain programs like QuickBooks Desktop, which do not function well or at all over VPN. Products like NordVPN or private internet are not what we were talking about here. Those are designed to give you privacy and security on public Wi-Fi, not remote access to your office. Generally speaking, VPN requires a piece of hardware. In most small and medium-sized businesses, that's your firewall. A cheap and basic business class firewall is going to generally cost you a couple $100 plus a wireless access point. We recommend a next generation firewall to all businesses, but you're now looking at spending $1,500 plus on that device. You'll also often have to buy licenses to allow VPN connections. Now, like all hardware, a firewall will eventually need to be replaced. However, this is not a monthly expense. Setting up a business class or next generation firewall will require you to have professional IT help. These are not designed to be user-friendly like consumer devices are. In addition, we often have to work with your internet provider and make changes to the way the internet is handled by their hardware to allow VPN to function. VPN requires you have an active internet connection on both sides to function. It is pretty forgiving of slower connections, but if you have a really slow or spotty connection, it will not function well. Ideally, VPN means you don't have to have a second computer in the office to connect to, which saves you money on hardware. However, you might have essential programs that do not work over VPN, so you would need to have a second computer in the office to remote into and use. QuickBooks Desktop is the most common cause of this we run into. That said, when set up correctly, VPN is a very reliable and secure connection method. It is generally our go-to when you need direct access to your office from a different location. A common alternative to VPN is one of the remote desktop solutions which can be found commercially. These have seen significant improvements in traction over the past 10 years. These programs install on your work computers, then you log into a website from somewhere else and can control your work computer. It functions very similarly to a VPN connection where you use remote desktop to control a computer in the office. There are a large number of options out there, but here are the primary three we see used. Each has some pros and cons, but by and large, they all function very similarly. These solutions are popular because it's completely possible to deploy them without any IT help and do it very quickly. You'll want to do a little research on deploying it in a way where you can lock out users that you may fire instead of letting everyone do their own thing. These tools easily allow you to change the computer you use to connect to your work computer. Now, these solutions really don't function well over slower internet connections. You will experience jerky mouse movements and just a generally frustrating experience if you can get it to connect at all. As a matter of fact, these solutions generally require more bandwidth than a VPN connection. Unlike VPN, these solutions will cost you every month. Pricing is generally $50 to $100 per computer per month. Another drawback is you are now letting a third party have access to your computers, which is somewhat risky. However, the biggest risk is your users not using good passwords or two-factor authentication and their accounts being breached. These tools are common targets of criminals when there's a password breach. Do not use one of these that is free. They are either so full of security flaws it's ridiculous, they are harvesting your data to sell, or are actually malware themselves. You need to use a paid version if you're going to do this. Also, if anyone here is HIPAA regulated, you need to have a signed business associate agreement with the vendor in place before starting to use one of these tools. If the only thing you need to share are your files, then what you're looking for is a file sync and share solution. These applications are allowing small offices to go completely serverless as your files are all stored in the cloud and synced out to everyone's computer when the files are changed. Unlike VPN or remote desktop applications, these tools allow you to work on files even without an active internet connection. When you next connect to the internet, it will sync any changes that have been made. These solutions also work the best of all the tools on slow or spotty internet connections. You can generally access these systems on phones and tablets as well. Although these systems will generally allow you to share and receive files, these systems will generally allow you to share and receive files with people outside of your company. This is useful when the files are too big to email or have sensitive information that you shouldn't be emailing. There are a huge number of players in the space. The most common one is Dropbox, but we generally do not recommend that vendor. If you already have Office 365 for email, you likely have OneDrive. If you're using G Suite, then you have Google Drive. Box is also a really good option and takes security very seriously. Most IT vendors, including us, have a solution they resell as well. This type of solution does not always require an IT pro to set up, although it can be easy to overlook something and leave you more exposed than you would wish. These solutions are generally not very expensive, anywhere between $5 and $20 per user per month. We recommend you steer clear of trying to use a bunch of free Dropbox accounts to avoid having to pay. This almost always ends up being a big mess where no one is sure of who owns what, and getting things shared effectively becomes impossible. File sync and share solutions really are a must-have for almost any remote work environment and can potentially save you a lot of money on servers and other equipment. You might need some professional help getting your file sync and share folder structure set up correctly and your access groups set up in a way that makes business sense and keeps your private data private. It is important to note these systems are not backup. Even though they do share some functionality and have some limited backup capacity, they are not true backup solutions. So some businesses don't really get phone calls, but for those of us that rely on our phones, making sure your workforce can at least receive calls remotely is critical. If you're not already using a hosted VoIP provider for your phone system, then we strongly recommend moving to one as soon as you can. If you have an on-premise phone system, you're getting your lines from AT&T or Spectrum, there really aren't a lot of options on how to choose to get calls remotely. Although we do not sell phone service, we deal with it on a regular basis. It is important for you to know what you want out of a phone system when you are evaluating them. Do you want only plain desk phones? Do you want to be able to take phone calls on your cell phone when you are not in the office? Do you want to be able to make phone calls from your cell phone that appear to come from the office? Do you not even want desk phones and you want everyone to be able to use their cell phones like they would a desk phone? How about being able to log into a web portal and see a status board of all the phone numbers and who's talking to whom? We have seen all these options at one point, but not necessarily all from the same vendor. Of the vendors we normally deal with, Low Latency, which is located in Pelham, provides the best service hands down. They are a different type of company and have a different delivery model. If reliability and customer service are your primary concerns, then they should be your first phone call. Unfortunately, low latency does not have all the bells and whistles of the bigger players in the industry. If low latency won't work for you, we generally recommend working with a company that resells multiple options. We're happy to point you in the direction of someone you can work with to sort through the other players based on your needs. However, if you want to go at it alone, of the big companies, our clients generally have the best experience and service from Nextiva. The last piece we're going to cover is collaboration tools. These tools help your teams interact and keep up with what is happening without all being located in the same physical space. We're really only going to look at 3 types of tools which we consider the foundation. Email will still be the workhorse for almost every company. It's easy to use and familiar to just about everybody these days. Your workforce can easily send things back and forth between themselves and the outside world, and you're already using it, so why are we going to talk about it? We still find a lot of companies getting email from A, the company that does their website, B, hosting their own email system, or C, using a free Gmail or Yahoo address. In this day and age, you should really be using a cloud-based email system from a provider that specializes in it, using your own domain name. Let's face it, bobsbusiness@gmail.com is not nearly as professional as bob@bobsbusiness.com. While there are still other providers out there, there's really one clear winner, which is Microsoft Office 365. It has about 87% of the market share. Google is the runner-up at 10%. We prefer Microsoft-based email systems over Google systems as they came from the business side first and are much more business-friendly than Google, which started on the consumer side. These cloud-based systems are very reliable and provide better security and usability than what you would get from email from your web provider and are generally cheaper than trying to host it yourself when you add in the licensing and support costs. As we mentioned previously, we are seeing more and more instances where email addresses are compromised. The most common but not only way this is done is through a phishing attack. The attacker sends an email asking you to download a file to pay a bill or something similar and provides a link. When you click on the link, it says it needs to verify your identity and ask for your email address and email password. If you put in your credentials, then you have a problem unless you've enabled two-factor. The earlier example where just the investigation to data breach was over $100,000 was an example of email compromise from an attack just like this. In this day and age, you absolutely need two-factor authentication turned on for your email systems. And generally that is not possible on the web-hosted versions and is difficult on the self-hosted versions. Additionally, you need better spam filtering than you would get from web-hosted or self-hosted. I really can't stress how common email compromise is and how devastating and expensive it can be. If you do not already have a chat program, you should definitely consider getting one. A chat program can go a long way to getting back some human interaction. I know I personally resisted using a chat program for a long time because it was just one more system for me to check. But when things first started to go south and start to shut down from the coronavirus, I set up a system that day because I knew we would need it to function remotely full-time instead of just occasionally. If you're using Office 365, then you probably have access to Microsoft Teams, which is a relative newcomer, but it shows great potential. If you're using G Suite, you have Hangouts. If you want to use a completely different program, then you can check out Slack, which is what we are currently using internally. Your younger employees are likely to take to this faster than your older ones, so try to encourage everyone to be patient. The chat programs can really make your life better, but they can also be very easily misconfigured and allow some behaviors you really do not want. A common setting in most of these programs that people are not aware of is that employees can invite people from outside of your company into your chats without permission. This could range from embarrassing to really bad, depending on who that person is and why they were invited. It also is possible to spread malware through most of these chat systems. Basically, if you're going to set one up, you need to take the time to review the security settings and make sure it's locked down like you need it to be. Online meeting tools have been around for a long time. We're using one right now for this webinar. Most people used to use these just to get together quickly for a meeting, to discuss some stuff, and not even bother with the webcams. However, something quite interesting is happening now. Since people are stuck in their homes, we're now seeing teams set up on all-day meetings where everyone uses their webcam to kind of be in the same room together in order to get more human contact. This can be especially helpful for your extroverted employees to stay sane while being isolated. These tools can also help with team cohesion and company culture, as well as a way to replace in-person meetings with vendors, clients, and prospects. There are lots of options to choose from in the marketplace. Zoom and GoToMeeting are two of the more popular ones, but you can even use programs like Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts. It's also possible that your VoIP provider has meeting software included in your phone package. When evaluating options, make sure you use a reputable company, and once again, stay away from the free ones, with the possible exception of Zoom. Regardless of which solution you choose, you need to make sure you review the security settings for it, just like your chat program. Some of these solutions, while very powerful, can allow unwanted activities. You should also spend some time getting familiar with it before you're using it for real for the first time. So we didn't have time to cover everything that goes into setting up a remote workforce. These are some of the things we didn't cover but need to be considered. Remote work will definitely have an impact on your company culture and how it is propagated. Like most things with culture, it is easier to get it right from the beginning than to change it later. Making sure that your data doesn't walk off is a complex topic during the best of times. With everyone working remotely, it is even more so. Ensuring that your employees are productive and actually doing their jobs and not seeing remote work as vacation time is something that just about every business owner thinks about. There are a lot of ways to approach this, and an entire industry that specializes in it. So generally speaking, governmental and regulatory compliance requirements do not care where your workforce is located. You may need some extra help and guidance to make sure you're doing what you should be doing to meet those requirements. Lastly, the security things we talked about today are what we consider the business basics. Every business should be doing these, but some businesses need to be doing more, such as monitoring computer logs or employee logins to look for intrusion attempts or behaviors that are abnormal and need to be investigated. Now, I love to talk to other business owners and other businesses, even about things that are not strictly technology related. And I'm happy to share with you how we deal with these things at Sawyer Solutions. So if you want to discuss any of these things or anything else, just let me know. So to recap, here are the 7 basic steps of security we covered. These are the same basics we cover no matter where a computer is located. You need to make sure you're covered on each of these for each device anyone in your workforce is using to access your systems and information. If you want a copy of this slide or the entire slide deck, I'm happy to help you. My email address is benji.sawyer@sawyersolutionsllc.com and will be on the screen in a few slides. So you can shoot me an email and I'll get it back to you. Or you can go to our website and fill out the contact us form, or call us at 844-448-7767. If you remember, we started today with your desire to set up an effective remote workforce while keeping everything secure. Hopefully you now have an idea of which flavor of salad dressing will be best for you and can make some informed decisions. If not, you should at least have enough knowledge to know what questions to ask and the tools you should be looking for. Once again, this is a high-level overview of remote work. You may have differing needs and requirements based on your business and whether these are going to be long-term solutions. We are happy to discuss any of that further. Now, hopefully you found this presentation useful and didn't fall asleep like my wife did when helping me proofread it. Now, to her credit, we do have twin 6-month-olds, so she's kind of tired a lot. But anyway, we are happy to share this presentation for free to businesses, association groups, or anyone who will sit still long enough. Just let us know. So once again, we offer free consultations where you can look at how your computers and systems are set up and make recommendations. And with that, time for questions.
Hey, Benji, we have one on the phone on the line right now in chat, and from Sam Duffy. Zoom has been in the news lately, but if proper settings are applied, is it a safe tool to use?
So Zoom has actually been in the news quite a bit lately. And we actually discussed this yesterday in our office. It's yes, the answer is yes. It is a relatively safe tool to use. A lot of the problems that Zoom is experiencing is because it came from the corporate world, or is basically used by internal teams, and is now being used in a completely different manner than anticipated. And so that said, they are very responsive to their security issues. For instance, the big security issue they've had recently is it allow you to steal your Windows credentials fairly quickly, fairly easily. They fixed that after like 2 days. So they are very responsive. They're aware of the security issues they're having, the problems they're having, and they're very proactive in taking care of those as fast as they can. Zoom has had some, exposures, but they are also a fairly new product. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, no one knew who Zoom was. So GoToMeeting, for instance, is a much more mature product. It's less likely to have the same issues, but doesn't mean it's not going to have issues of its own. So bear that in mind. Hopefully that answered your question. Yes, you can still use Zoom. It's okay, but make sure your settings are set up okay, so people can't do things you don't want them to do. Does that make sense?
Well, Sam, if that doesn't answer the question, let me know further. From David Whitehurst, please repeat the types of cyber insurance coverage we need to address.
So your cyber liability policy, and I'm not an insurance sales guy. Just so you know, we don't sell insurance, so we do review insurance with our clients quite often. What you're looking for is a cyber liability policy. And these days, most commercial brokers will have some to sell you. That said, we've seen significant variations in coverage offerings between various companies. So we deal mostly with independent brokers, and so they'll present 3 or 4 different ones. And we had one client, and they're a medical spa kind of place, right? And they had 3 options to choose from, and one was really good coverage and was a third of the price of the other ones. And so we went through that thing with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it offered everything they needed. It had, had what's called a business interruption insurance built into it. So if they have a data breach and they can't work for a while, it covers the cost, as well as a bunch of other stuff. It's just that company was offering that package really wanted people like him. They figured for whatever reason, so they were offering a very attractive pricing. So when you sit down to look at the coverage, you need to make sure, you've talked really well, hopefully with your commercial broker, and he knows your business and knows the kind of stuff you have. And he's asked you a bunch of questions about like what kind of data you have, where your data lives, what kind of security precautions you take, and all that kind of thing, so that he can make a good recommendation and provide you a good product. Does that make sense?
David, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. If anybody else has any questions, you can go down to the bottom of your screen and hit chat and send your question. I don't know if the reaction has, I don't think just go to chat and type your question in. While we're letting you have just a minute, Benji, I have a question for you.
Sure.
We use Avast, but we use a paid version, the pro version. How is that in comparison?
You still shouldn't use that. To be completely frank, Avast and AVG, even the paid versions, are inferior products. In the security industry, they are, honestly, they're jokes. And even the paid versions, they're still selling your data.
Ooh,
so they've been caught multiple times doing it. So they had Google plugins for Chrome to help safe browse, if you will. It's supposed to help protect you from malicious links or whatever. Yeah. And Google has delisted them multiple times because they're stealing your data out of there and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they're scummy. Don't use them.
Okay. All right. Well, so we've got some work to do. Let's see, any other questions out there? I have one other one. If our programs that we're using are web-based,
Mhm.
do we still need a backup? I mean, obviously we have some things, but very little of our own documents, et cetera, on our computers.
So that is actually a really good question we get quite often. And the answer on that one is it depends. So more and more companies are going to cloud-based systems, and they have, you know, most, if not all, of their primary programs they use are cloud-based. So it comes down to everyone. No one system is going to give you everything you need. You always have data that exists outside of that system. So the question is really, how important is that data? Is it annoying to recreate? Is it critical to recreate? So for instance, QuickBooks Online. A lot of people go into QuickBooks Online and not using the desktop QuickBooks anymore.
Right.
So it has all of your critical data, but have you created a bunch of spreadsheets that, you know, is going to take you a couple days to get back if your computer dies? You know, how much is that time worth? So the answer is probably not. It's probably not going to shut your business down if you're a fully cloud-based system and the vendors are backing up your stuff if a computer dies. But it could just be enough of a pain to warrant the investment, because file level backup, these things are like $15 a month per computer. So they're not really very expensive, you know. So, you know, most people, their employees that are going to be doing this kind of stuff, you know, they pay them more to $15 an hour. So is it basically worth, you know, less than an hour's worth of labor a month to ensure that if something goes wrong, you don't have to spend hours or days, you know, recreating things which you can recreate, but are just kind of a pain in the butt to do.
Yeah, okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Liz has Googled and found about Avast software, which I don't know if anybody else uses that. Is a Czech multinational cyber security software company headquartered in the Prague, excuse me, Czech Republic, that researches and develops computer security software, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, per Wikipedia. So good information.
I don't want to come off sounding, I don't know what the proper term for this is, but you generally do not want to trust companies that have headquarters in certain parts of the world.
Yeah.
China, never trust a company. So you know, since people aren't asking a lot of questions, I'm going to go fill in some more stuff for you guys that we do get talked about quite often. Lenovo computers, never buy a Lenovo computer. Lenovo has been caught multiple times installing spyware on their computers. They are a Chinese-owned company. And if you're not familiar with how the Chinese economy works, they, you know, the state controls it, and they, you know, and they are big into industrial espionage and stealing stuff. And so multiple times Lenovo has been caught installing spyware from the factory on people's computers. Never use them. You know, if a company is based in Russia, be extremely leery, because while it's not as you know, as forced or as tight as the Chinese relationship is between government and industry, there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on there. You know, it is one of the, you know, the Russian mob controls a lot of stuff. The Russian government's also not very trustworthy. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, really underhanded things that go on there. The Kaspersky is a very popular AV product, which the Department of Defense, you know, recently said no one in the government can use anymore. Mm-hmm. Is it because Kaspersky has been infiltrated by the KGB, which is what they're saying? I can't tell you that for sure. However, is it a risk you're really wanting to run, right? When there are alternatives out there where you don't have that problem. So, you know, former Russian Federated States, the former Soviet bloc states, a lot of times have similar problems because their culture is very similar in a lot of ways. So we tend to stay away from places that are Eastern Bloc, you know, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, North Korea, or, you know, Iran. You know, those are the hotbeds of cybercrime.
Okay, good to know, and things to be top of mind if you're looking at new computers or software, so including me. Any other questions out there? Okay, nobody's. I'm going to unmute, and if anybody has anything and you couldn't find the chat screen, now's your time to ask. Okay, I think that's covered most of the questions. If you have additional questions for Benji or Sawyer Solutions, his information is right here online, and I'm sure he would be glad to answer them for you. And Benji, we're grateful to you for sharing information with us today. This is critical information to be aware of as you're trying to define what this new life is looking like for all of us. We've got to be aware of the security issues. I know we've talked about that on our staff, and talk about, in fact, after we did a training class with you, I don't know, a couple of years ago, we started using LastPass. So we need to go back and make sure everybody's working with that in our office. So anyway, we are grateful to you, and hope you all have a great rest of the day, and reach out to us if there are any things that we can help you with. Otherwise, unless you have no other questions, this is the end of the meeting. Thank you for being part of it.
Thank you, Karen, for having this.
Thank you.
Bye.
Y'all have a good day.